you're a small-time political YouTuber who has this crazy idea about turning the pyramid of preemption upside down and making local governments the highest law in the land. You've been talking about how local government is this cool, accountable place where everyday voices matter, but in practice, local government is usually where your 65-year-old homeowning neighbor Steve goes to complain about gas-powered leaf blowers. Well-off homeowning retirees like Steve are the ones who have the time and the capacity to show up on a Thursday night and complain about leaf blowers at a city council meeting. They're also the ones who can afford to do stuff like show up in the middle of the day and vote in a local election where other people might be working or taking their kids to school or going to the doctor's office. This doesn't mean Steve's doing anything wrong, he's just trying to have his voice heard. What this does mean is that local governments often represent a privileged subset of the community instead of the interests of everybody as a whole. And if we devolved a bunch of power to local governments, that expanded authority would just be exercised on behalf of that privileged subset. That's not what we want. The whole point of trying to change things in the American system of government is to make things fairer and more accountable for the average person. So what are we going to do to make sure that when we hand local governments all this extra power, it's exercised in a way that takes everybody's interests into account? Well, here's an idea. Why don't we break out the togas and give direct democracy a try? If local laws are passed on a one-person, one-vote basis, then the playing table is totally even. Nobody's voice matters more than anyone else's. At least in theory. In practice, the problem with direct democracy is that it requires people to show up in person to meetings and cast votes. That means you need to have the capacity and the availability to trek out to your town hall very frequently and cast votes on items. And it's the people who have that capacity and availability who are going to win the day in a directly democratic form of government. As we just discussed, the only people with that kind of availability are Steve and other wealthy retirees. So going to a kind of traditional, directly democratic form of government wouldn't really solve the problems that we're identifying in the current small r Republican form of government. A proxy system could help solve these pragmatic problems of direct democracy. Under this proxy system, you could go to a city council meeting in person and cast your vote if you want, but you also could delegate someone else to act as your proxy. That proxy would then exercise two votes, their own vote plus your vote that you delegated to them. And if you made the proxy system such that you could delegate your vote away at any time and withdraw the delegation authority at any time, then you'd end up with this cool situation where anyone who wants to can go out and exercise their vote directly, but anyone who doesn't have the capacity can still delegate their vote to someone they're confident will represent their interests, meaning that Steve and the other retirees aren't going to be the only ones who have the ability to vote. The end result would be a system that captures all of direct democracy's benefits while mitigating all of the participatory difficulties that direct democracy creates.